Our lives are a string of insights, flashes of inspiration that can be the catalyst for new ideas. However, our pace of life these days means we tend to miss some of them completely. I'm Dave Hill, and I'm the host of the Simple Reflections podcast, a fortnightly series of interviews with people from all walks of life. Our conversations are an invitation to reflect on some of the simple insights my guests have had that have gone on to have a profound impact on their lives. So grab a cuppa and a biscuit, join us, slow down for a little while and see what shows up for you. Welcome to the next episode of the Simple Reflections podcast. Today, I'm joined by a chap called Nick Bottini. Nick is a coach based in East London and mainly works with high performers in the music industry. He's a jazz musician himself, and he's the author of Just Play. And he's been someone I've been wanting to meet for a while. So it's been lovely to get this opportunity to invite him on and come and join us on the Simple Reflections podcast. So Nick, welcome.
Hi, Dave. Really good to be here.
And it's lovely to have you. I'm always fascinated to see how people have found this understanding of the three principles showing up in their life. And, you know, I don't know whether there's a sort of start point story from your perspective or whether you prefer to come at it from the how you're seeing it today view. You know, this capacity that we've all got to learn through insight is always fascinating, and I just love seeing how other people see it. So, what are you thinking?
It's really interesting because I think probably the truth of the matter is it was several decades in the making to get me to that point. So because I, as a music student, there was a certain point at which, you know, I'd been this high-performing kid, and then got to a point where I felt like I plateaued, and that was because I was trained originally as a violinist, and I had some physical challenges, and it turned into quite a serious overuse problem. And you know, I'd formerly been this very bright kid that could solve every single problem, and then I was, for the first time in my life, confronted with a problem that no matter who I went to, I couldn't solve it. And it was starting to really give me this sense of like the walls were closing in and I didn't know where to go. So there was this, because music was so central to me. This is about sort of the age of 18, 19, where I was like, I'm running out of options here. I don't know what to do. I want this career I've always sort of set my dreams on is being taken away from me. It felt like there was this sort of intense, obsessive, actually, desire to figure out how to get out of pain and how to sort of change some habits. And so, because I was so driven to figure it out, that's what had me go at quite an early age into personal development. But then going round the houses to then. You know, I did some NLP stuff. I did some sort of classic sort of psychological approaches, and then somehow, not quite understanding what it was, I ended up in a training that turned out to be a three principles training. And then it was like, oh, this feels really simple, and it's really helping like something else, like nothing else has happened. It suddenly made a lot of sense. So there was this big. I had this very sort of meandering path that seemingly accidentally had me end up in the conversation. So I didn't, when I arrived in that training, I didn't know, like, I guess what I was getting myself into, but I'm really glad that I did. So was that fate? Was that grace? I don't know, but it was intense suffering. It felt like the starting point was intense suffering, and then I found my way to this understanding. Yeah.
I think a lot of people relate to that. You know, the suffering that we can experience from time to time, we'll put up with for a while until it gets so noisy that we won't, and we go and do something about it. And that normally looks like searching around, trying to find something. And I think what I got drawn into in terms of this understanding was that it wasn't something that I needed to know. It was something that was already there. So it was not learn this stuff and you'll be golden. It's just, are you aware of this thing that's within you already?
Mm.
And then, as you said, sort of seeing, oh wow, okay, yeah, that's simpler than I imagined it to be. Right, now the brakes are off. What next? And yeah, your your story around that is echoed again and again and again and again, which is wonderful because that's what you and I aim to do for our clients.
Right. Yeah. And that, I think people, there was definitely a point at which I was not looking for principles. I wasn't looking for what I ended up finding. I was following the breadcrumbs that made sense. And for a time that was like it was all about high performance psychology. I was pretty obsessed with playing at my best. And so that was the story I would have told myself. But as it unraveled over the years, it was about self-expression, and it was discovering who that self was, or what it was, and what it
Mm.
was when, like, why is it that sometimes there are these kind of flow moments where I don't seem to be there in quite the same way, and the music is kind of playing me or something? What's that about? And it started to join up all the dots, and there was this kind of, missing link aha moment of like, oh, that's what it is, like the mind and spirit. It's all that stuff is one thing. It's like, oh, okay.
When that clicked in for you, how did that evolve? From the happenstance of going to that training and being introduced to something to where you are today. It's not a sort of big bang moment that you in that instant you became the person that you are today, sat here in front of me. Um, how did how did that unfold for you?
Mm. Well, I think at first I tried to shoehorn the principles that were being talked about into like a kind of cognitive model, or like I thought, oh yeah, I get that. I've heard that before. That's the same. And then there were these little anomalies, or there was these things that, and I remember spending a lot of time trying to intellectualize at first and trying to write out, oh, this belief system maps against this belief system. I went super, academically, intellectually very heavy at first, and I think then I realized it wasn't something that you learned that way. It wasn't that kind of learning. It was a kind of insight based, or kind of unlearning that I was actually doing. And so then I realized, and like you said about stories being echoed, I realized that I was fascinated by different people's take on it. So I went through this period of wanting to speak to as many first generation teachers who knew Sid, and there were these opportunities. It was Jamie Smart's clarity training that I did, and he, at the time, he had these little masterclass sessions and sort of hot seat coaching opportunities, and I was just always first in the queue to have a conversation with Nick Bettinger, or Keith Blevins, or Kathy Casey, or Mark Howard, or like all these people. It was just like I wanted to absorb the good stuff, and I just thought something would change. So I definitely went through this period of uh, just being in the conversation somehow, and going into uncharted waters. And then I remember there was a particular point at which I'd found my way to another coaching session with another kind-hearted coach, and uh, I remember very distinctly the conversation where I've been hearing about everything is it's all thought, and all the objects and all the experiences. It's my thinking. It's my thinking. Hadn't really occurred to me that the Nick Bottini thing was a thought as well. It hadn't occurred to me that the thing that I thought was doing the thinking was itself a thought, and maybe didn't really quite exist in the way that I thought it did, and that I was basically made up. And it wasn't, I don't think it was even said to me in that way, but there was this definite kind of it felt like a kind of unplugging from the Matrix kind of experience of like, oh wow, there's genuinely nothing to worry about here. That everything's fine. I'm fine, And I remember coming out of that coaching session. This was there's a coach called John Countryman. He's a fabulous coach, and yeah, I remember just he had the sense to kind of say, well, don't do too much. You've had quite a big experience, and I went for a little walk, and I was very kind to myself and didn't do too much. But I remember sort of walking around and wanting to hug the trees and like say hello to everybody, and I think it was probably one of the first times that I realized I kind of really woke up to how much love there was available in me or in life or and for someone who'd been harshly judging himself for
Mm,
for very many years and in physical pain for a lot of years to really feel that I was okay, um, and that I had found the thing that I'd finally found what I was looking for. It was just such an incredible joy,
mm,
um, and gift, and it's really, and that's and how I see it now is that all of that, everything that was necessary to bring me to this conversation now is such a gift because it was quite young that I was really hardcore seeking for help. I was 18, 19, and I've spent so many years of exploring what doesn't work that now, what an amazing gift to be able to give that those decades of getting it wrong to the musicians who are maybe they might be in their 40s or their 50s, quite a lot of them. It's the first time they've sort of really explored spirituality or psychology, because basically for a lot of them their playing and their life it's been okay. There's never been this kind of crisis point where they've needed to go searching, and then they sort of have their sort of first seeking experience, and I feel so blessed to know I've got you. This is one thing. I might not necessarily be the perfect violin teacher for you or musical teacher because you've got such amazing skills that you're fantastic at already. But when it comes to pointing home and helping you out of this internal sort of suffering. Like I know the way, So yeah, there was this series of different stages I feel like I went through, and then it's just been this deepening and these moments of like, oh, really? It's the same issue, really? Okay, yeah,
mm.
yeah. Still thought, yeah. You're making it about me, yeah. Still making it about me. Okay, right. Drop it.
Yeah. The I sort of liken that the role that we have as coaches is a little bit like being a guide. Um, we're taking people on a bit of an adventure and we don't quite know what we're going to find, but we know everything that's out there in the bush is out there in the bush, and we might see something, and the client might see something, and we can share around that and see how that unfolds, and yeah, no two safaris are the same. Um, and that again, it takes a whole load of pressure off us as the guide, um, because it's not as if there's a set list of things to tick off. Um, yeah, because we don't quite know what's going to show up, and that's the bit to be alive to. Hmm. So how are you finding, um, your with your client base being sort of musical, in the main, the there is a huge, as a non-musician, um, looking in from the outside, there is a lot of just being, and again, excuse the pun, in tune with the instrument and the music.
Hmm.
Um, Having attempted to try and learn things in the past, while I'm trying hard, it's difficult. And then when something clicks, it's not. Um,
Hmm.
do you find that because your clients have a relationship with that kind of experience already? Do they find exploring the principles simpler than others might, or do you think it's much the
Hmm.
same?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know if I can uh,
That's cool.
give a definitive answer on that because I think well probably what's true is that I think music fundamentally is a spiritual experience. So even if we're not using the same words, I think particularly the performers who are most well even like performers, composers, producers. Um, uh, if you speak to a songwriter who's written a lot of songs, they will always say pretty much that it doesn't feel like it's them that wrote it. It's that something's come through them. Came from somewhere else, right? Or if you speak to a performer, that they'll often say that they've experienced these moments where like something kind of relaxed or the mind relaxed and they got out of the way. So uh, I think there's already for a lot of them, I think there's already an awareness that that space exists.
Hmm.
But having said that, I've found that when you speak to most people, if they when they really sort of stop and think about it, most people have touched that space. They just haven't necessarily
Yeah.
realized they have. But I guess the thing that is true is that um, because I have studied music myself, I will speak a kind of musical sort of vocabulary in the way that I'll talk about the
Hmm.
same thing. But I think as much as uh, as much as I would sometimes like to think that musicians are different, or certain kinds of people are in different sort of levels like that. I mean, this is such a music industry thing of like who's the best, who's the most experienced, who's got the most Grammys, this, who went to the right college, that, there's a lot of that, and that's in lots of,
Yeah, it's
professions
everywhere.
as well. Yeah. Um, but yeah, having the privilege of speaking to the kinds of people who you might not think would have a coach, or for people who don't know much about what
Hmm.
goes on in the world of coaching, like I've spoken to some pretty serious musicians, and they're human beings.
Yeah.
It's all the same stuff. The contents may be different, but yeah, we're all in the same boat. It's
Mm.
that
Yeah.
surprised me. It did surprise me because I had for a long time, gone through the sort of musical training that I went through and looking up to, or they must have something different in their mindset, or they must be stronger, or they must be more consistent, or they must be born more creative, whatever that means. And there are individual kind of quirks and there are individual sort of tastes that people have, but thought is a creative agent and we're all born of that agent,
Mm.
So, I see us increasingly, I see us all in the same boat.
That's a really awesome point and beautifully put. Uh, that there, but you also raise a really interesting thing in terms of um, Jamie Smart will talk about getting someone's world and understanding their map, or,
Mm,
as an example. None of which means anything important, but what it does mean is seeing where someone is at the starting point
mm,
and where they're looking at the world from. Uh, and quite a helpful thing is to understand the language that they use,
mm,
because that
mm,
speeds the whole process up. So yeah, no, I can completely see that, and I think the work that I do with veterans, that that's also true. We speak a language that doesn't necessarily fit in everywhere, but we recognize it, and it feels comfortable, and
mm,
that assists with people quietening down, um, because they feel that this is familiar, or that
mm,
that you get me. Um, mm, yeah, sorry, that was a really
mm,
really beautiful reminder of that. Is
mm.
understanding who it is we're speaking to and where they're coming from.
I tell you something else that's occurring to me is that with people have their own experiences with the principles, and so, for some people, this is just my sort of hallucination, right? But it seems like some people are drawn to it because it's got this kind of it's a feel they get like a feeling of relaxation or a feeling of healing, maybe. But it was never I was never drawn to the conversation for that reason. I was drawn to it about high performance and about doing things really well, and a former sort of striving kind of person. I saw it as a potential solution to playing better, right? So I was looking for more,
Mhm.
at that time, and I think that's definitely common ground that I have with, and that's where it doesn't just apply to musicians. It's often high performers, or maybe
Yeah.
leaders, or maybe artists, or maybe people who are looking for sort of peak performance in themselves. Because a real epiphany to me to realize that there was this kind of non-dual thing going on where you could still be really consistent and really sort of committed to the diligent precision of being an elite world-class performer, whilst also not taking that seriously at all.
Mhm.
And so it's not that you have to kind of, now you've discovered spirituality, or now you've found source, that it's all none of that practice stuff matters. It doesn't work like that at all. It's like now you're not making it mean anything about you, so
Yeah.
you can go even more into the high performance, but also it's on someone else's behalf. It's not on this ego behalf. It's
Mm.
on the behalf of what's wanting to be expressed as fully as possible. So, not feeling good about something, or not feeling like you want to get up, or not feeling like you want to practice today, that doesn't make any sense as a limiting factor anymore. It's like, oh, I can play even when I don't feel like it, but when I need to sleep, or I need to stop, or my body hurt, I can listen to the wisdom of it. So I was drawn to it for a very sort of high performing thing, and I find that that's definitely something that really resonates, because I do see some uh, I encounter some musicians who've kind of started this on the spiritual path, but then they've kind of told themselves if they're really going to be spiritual, they shouldn't be striving to make money, or they shouldn't be practicing, so they shouldn't be working so hard. Whereas, they're quite relieved when they sort of come to me, and they find that actually, oh, they can be a real geek about their instrument, and they can be absolutely obsessive, but in a completely new way,
Yeah.
and they can still care about beauty and excellence and winning a competition and all that stuff. So there's definitely something, I think, that the musician's sort of approach, or the high performing starting point, it really resonates with people, I think.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Before I hit record, I was talking about the Three Principles conference, and the that conference in London for me is just, it's like a buffet. It's got anybody and everybody there, from the hugely spiritual, very very gentle, just take it, go with the flow side of life, to the absolute high performance, whether that be athletic, or music, or business, or whatever, and everything else in between. And that was one of the things that really drew me in to start off with, was, oh right, this isn't segregated into a pot of people that this works for. This is a human being sport across the board.
Mm,
And part of my exploration with all of this is listening to different voices, hearing different perspectives on it, because that's where I'm going to learn between the difference of my understanding and someone else's. There's space there for me to learn. And there are people that find this really quite relaxing, and at times I do, but I find it hugely energizing.
mm,
For me, it's just exciting. It's an adventure, and who knows where it's going to take me, and or the people that are with me in that conversation at that particular moment in time, and that's, yeah, something that is really cool to see. The last two episodes, we've had Harriet Hancock, who's a senior leader in a immigration and justice world. Matt Roberts, who's a former GB high jumper, you know, there's me as a veteran, there's you as a musician, and anything and everything else that's been in and involved in this. It's it's lovely to see the commonality in the differences of those stories.
Mm.
Because in the differences is the space for someone to see something exciting for them, for what it looks
Mm.
like for them. And uh, I'm sure you see that with your clients is they come in with a view of what it is that they want. You sit there with a view, well, let's see what we can create from here, and something else happens in the middle. And they go away with something bigger and more exciting than they could ever have imagined
Mm.
from their original set of goals. Not that there was anything wrong with them.
Yeah, I think it's so remarkable how at different stages of the journey or in different seasons of our life or whatever, like we I found that at certain points I've heard a certain teacher or read a certain book and thought, oh, this is not for me right now, and then I'll return to it later. Or there's just certain people that they arrive at the right time, and it just feels like this incredible sort of soulmate connection with a teacher or with someone that's uh, saying things in a completely different way, and that really sparks something new. And then that time with that teacher might come to an end, or you might move on, or you might some people you want to sort of stay with for longer. I just find there's something remarkable about how, like, I don't know, we see there are so many forms of like nourishment in the people that
Mm,
we have in our lives, and I love what you said about the conference being like that, because I think it's not, because for a time I definitely thought, oh, everyone's talking in a calm voice, and there were certain voices that I'd heard a lot of, and it felt it was all about relaxing or sort of finding peace. And then I came across a few people who were doing something different. It was like, it had my attention in a different
yeah.
sort of way. And now I don't know, I guess I'm being drawn to, like I guess, like you're saying, like the variety, there's clues everywhere, even especially in the stuff that might trigger us or might seem like we know it already. So I think there's definitely something that we can only get by listening and being open to being students of of life.
Mm, yeah. 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 I probably bored my children so much with it that I have teenage girls. But every day is a school day for me. I am not looking for a lesson, but I know a lesson is going to come along, and I'm
Yeah.
excited when it shows up. And yeah, you never quite know what's around the corner.
Mm.
Um, and and that's exciting. It could look scary at times, but actually it's exciting. And there's for me, the what I've noticed is the difference between the feeling of feeling afraid and feeling excited. The feeling is fairly similar. I could be feeling sick with excitement, and I could be feeling sick with fright. And the only difference is how much attention I'm paying to the thoughts that are running through my mind in that moment.
Mm.
And that's all I need to know. That's all there ever is being conscious of that and being aware, calibrating myself, and go, oh, okay, cool. That's the direction my mind's going in. We've been here before. This is just new territory. Let's just go gently. Hmm. Wonder what's been new and exciting for you in the last 6 to 12 months. What's been catching your
Oh.
attention?
Do you know what? I've fallen back in love with uh, attention to detail. I'll put it that way, or precision, because being trained as a violinist, I definitely went through this sort of very harsh, judgmental phase of, like, if it's not perfectly in tune, if it's not perfectly in time, if it's not being played perfectly in the right part of the bow, in line with the tradition, as if it wasn't all perfect and it was wrong. but so there's a point at which I saw that all of that was thinking, and I could sort of decouple from that, and I've really, and it's been, it's come and gone, and I've changed my relationships with it, but I've really felt like I can be the geek, I can be, I can embrace that obsessive part of me, but there's a healthy obsession.
Mhm.
And but also in my business, and also, precision of my language that I'm using with clients, or precision when I'm writing a post or something like that. That attention to detail, I think I've fallen back in love with, because I think there was a period where I sort of, um, because, if we're talking about principles, and we're talking about the big picture, and we're talking about undergirding reality of life, it can all be rather, it can seem vague, or it
Uh-huh.
can be that, we're pointing out of details. But really feels exciting to me is that all of that's true, and I love details, and I think I've really come to, I've really come to see that I think, it's a particular preference that I have. So I've noticed that when I'm speaking with people, they appreciate my attention to detail, and when I hold back from that, I'm not quite being my full self. So I'm not saying that every single person needs to, be sort of, to do things in the way I do, but I've noticed that there is this, uh, I've got a fascination with it. Business systems, or language, or musical details. Like I'm just obsessed with like little fine details, and that feels like it's much more. Certainly in the last 3 or 4 months, it's felt much more integrated, and it doesn't feel like I'm not allowed to do it anymore. It feels like I can drop it when I have to, and when I'm getting
Mhm.
too much into it, I can let go of it. But when I want to, geek out, I can fill my boots and, go with it. So,
Yeah. Oh, no, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah, I can find myself getting lost in things at times. Um, and normally then something just goes,
mm.
come on, Dave, back in the room. Um, uh, yeah, I think everybody will probably be able to relate to that to some degree. But I think it comes back to that business you were talking about earlier on of you can be completely engrossed in something and be
Mm.
completely relaxed about it.
Do you know what was also springing to mind as we're talking about this? Sid used to mention, Christ consciousness, right? He used to talk about it early on, and I think before he was calling them principles. And I think another thing that goes with this, precision. I think it's really, it's like, in Zen they talk about the middle way. So it's not a compromise of the dark and the light. It's like it's complete embracing of the extremes, and there's this kind of, it seems like it's a conflict at first.
Mhm.
Like, is it dark, is it the light, which is best? And then it becomes, about, it seems like there's a paradox that somehow they both seem to kind of be true, but how do we make sense of it? And then there's this point at which we kind of settle into, there's no conflict whatsoever, and it's the logical consequence of it. And it feels like that with, am I spirit? Am I human? Is it a physical reality, or is it a spiritual reality? Well, Sid says it's a spiritual reality. Okay, well, it's spiritual, that's true, but it's also intensely physical, and intensely human, and
Mhm.
very real, and very grounded, and, in some ways no different to how it was before I knew anything about the principle. It's
Yeah.
always been the same, right? And I feel that kind of, being able to be both sides of the coin, and knowingly at the same time. So being God walking on this earth, that feels very, um, energizing. And it feels very powerful as well. It doesn't
Mm.
like it doesn't feel like a kind of, relaxing thing to me at all. It feels like, right, there's stuff to get done. There's a mission to be, followed here. So that feels very, yeah, it feels very alive to me, I must say.
Mm. Yeah. I love the concept of, or just asking people the question about, when did you feel most alive?
Mm.
I'm watching them light up as they're describing it. Okay, what's that all about? Um, that's been one of the most fun things to explore is
Mm.
this understanding talks to us when we are most alive, when we're most in life, when we're most in the moment, be it light or dark or a mixture of all. Um, it's the acceptance of that and just getting on and playing the game as it is in this moment. Um, no matter where our thinking is. I remember a story as a former, well, yeah, former Scottish rugby player. I think he's still playing rugby, but in the US, who came across the principles a few years ago, and he he had a very rigid ritual to get him ready for a game. And if anything went wrong with that, then it probably wasn't going to be a good game. And there was evidence to prove that. And when it did go well, he normally played well. And if that didn't, well, it was just some anomaly. Something happened on the pitch or whatever. Well, he'd been learning about the principles, and I think he'd read Jamie's book Clarity, and the day had gone very, very well. In his ritual sense, got onto the pitch, touched the ball in the first 30 seconds, fumbled it, and the opposition scored. At which point his thinking went through the floor, and he can't remember any of the rest of the game, other than at the end when the whistle blew, he was made man of the match. His thinking was, I am the worst player in the world. This is going to be horrendous. It's going to be. No, he was player of the match. And that sort of made him go, huh, okay, there's something in this thinking thing. Um, it doesn't, what I'm thinking doesn't necessarily equate to how I play. In for him on the rugby pitch, but from a musician's point of view with your instrument, for the rest of us in life, you know, our thinking is a good guide to let us know the direction that we might take ourselves, but it has no reflection on our capacity to play all out. And I think that's a really interesting thing that most of us won't have ever toyed with, because if our thinking's through the floor, we're expecting it all to be rubbish, and then we go around trying to hoover up all the ideas that help us corroborate our current view.
Mm. Mm. It's interesting because uh, I encounter a lot of people who spent many years kind of building up this story that I am a musician and I'm so committed that music is my life, music is everything. They'll often say these things, and some of the most nourishing and uh, freeing moments is when they question that, and maybe if I could actually throw that away, like if I wasn't so attached to that whole identity of being a musician, what would that make possible? And the creativity that comes from going, oh, okay, I'm not that at all,
Mm.
and it's just like this completely uh yeah, blank canvas for them, and the thing that they thought was a prerequisite for high performance was actually the barrier to the next level of high performance.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's
Yeah.
in the last place they're looking for it,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
right?
Yeah. I've got this bit nailed. I'm,
Yeah, yeah,
100% in on that. Could that be the thing that's in the way though?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's so much juice to play with. Um, and it does just come back to understanding where someone is to start off with, seeing what their world looks like and seeing where that can take us from that
Mm,
viewpoint.
yeah.
Nick, thank you so much. It's been lovely to have you.
It's my pleasure.
Is there anything that you've got coming up in the next month or two that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yes, there is. So I I run a program called Project Domino. So my mission is to make the music industry a kinder, happier, more fulfilling place and make it so that it works for everybody. And I've found that by getting music industry people or creatives and sometimes coaches and sometimes principals, teachers, getting them together in a conversation about the whole domain of maybe client creation, maybe relationship building, maybe networking. Really cool conversations come about when we're talking about that stuff, and there's this kind of feeling whilst we're talking about business and relationships and sales and that kind of thing. So that's in the pipeline, and it's been growing over the last sort of couple of years. I've been running these cohorts. We get incredible people. So yeah, that whole domino movement is growing, and there's another one of those starting in January.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's I'm very excited about it.
I will grab a link from you and stick it in the show notes so that people can find it. Nick, thank you so much for coming to join me today. It's been lovely to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for the invite.
You're very welcome. 3 quick things from me before you go. Firstly, I'm looking at creating some bonus episodes based on topics that grab your attention. They'll be short, they'll just be me. But if you'd like to contribute to that and give me some ideas, feel free to send me an email. I'm also going to be running a 60-minute workshop on the role of clarity in decision making. There'll be a link in the show notes to help you learn a little bit more about that if that's interesting. And if you're really enjoying this, feel free to share it with your friends. It'd be lovely to see how far and wide we can spread this. Anyway, take care. All the best.
Thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed the conversation, feel free to subscribe and join me and my new guest next time. If you're interested in the work I'm doing, or you think I can be of service to you or your organisation, please email dave@simplicityofmind.co.uk. Remember, see if you can find time to slow down and reflect. Those simple ideas might be worth listening to. Take care, and I hope you can join me in a couple of weeks.